last time we left off, we were talking about how classical liberalism went towards the left, towards our great leader Mao Zedong, okay, and ended up closer to the left through progressivism and Teddy Roosevelt, okay. Now, we're going to talk about some events that happened that actually pushed the U.S. economic spectrum back over towards classical liberalism here, okay. So, the really key event that kind of stopped the momentum of the U.S. economic system going towards the left was World War I. Okay. So I won't go too deep into it, but really the end result of World War I was that Europe really lost a lot of financial and political power at this point. So they lost farmlands, so they couldn't make food for themselves. Okay. They lost factories and people. So they couldn't really manufacture goods for themselves at this point. Really, the only money that Europe was getting was from Germany from reparation payments. Okay. So this is how poor they are. However, at the end of World War I, good old US of A here kind of came out on top. I mean, they had losses, but really they came out on top. Their actual physical geographic country was left unscathed. So their farmlands were good. Okay. Farmlands were good. And a lot of the industrial factories that were made for building planes and different instruments of war got repurposed into making consumer goods, meaning cars, okay, radios, and things like fridges and washing machines, okay? So really in the US end here, they're doing a really good job and they're kind of coming out on top. And this situation, where Europe is paying a lot of money, okay, to survive to the US because they're shipping food over here, this is kind of the stage that has been set for Roaring 20s to actually happen, okay? So let's get into it and let's talk about what the Roaring 20s actually looked like and how it happened.
I heard it was all about booze and girls.
Pretty much, actually. So, when we're talking about Roaring 20s, we're talking about a period where people were so rich and they had so much time on their hands that Hollywood really just exploded onto the scene at this point. People were listening to jazz, going to bars, they were dancing. Okay?
Except it was during Prohibition. But everyone was doing it illegally.
Exactly. So, they were not drinking, they were just dancing at dance clubs, right? Nothing suspicious there. So at this point, we're seeing a huge increase in wealth of the people. So people have a lot of time. So that's why it's called the Roaring 20s, because there's a lot of cultural leaps that are happening in the United States. So there's a few things. So like we talked about, Europe is giving the United States quite a bit of money and people are making money that way. Also, with the invention of consumer goods, like I said, vehicles, this is the first time where, cars are becoming a common household item. Things like refrigerators, things like washing machines, people want to buy these things, okay? US is on a high. They just won a big fight. And people are really buying these things on credit because the US government feels comfortable with Europeans giving them money for food. They're making money. So banks in the United States are just throwing money at people saying, you'll get us back later. Okay. And at this point, with the Roaring 20s, the ideologies of people are actually starting to shift back towards the right. And the reason for that is when things are good, when things are happy, when you're an American, okay, you're getting a lot of money, you're going to associate that with classical liberalism or capitalism. Danger to that, especially at this point in time, is that classical liberalism and the capitalism that was happening at this point, and the capitalism that was happening at this point had some key differences. Okay, so at this point, we're having people who are very wealthy, who have a lot of money, that actually has actual money rather than credit. They're actually able to build things, build businesses, build factories, and give the poor people, the laborers, jobs. However, in this scenario, what's happening is there are banks popping up everywhere because there's so much wealth in the United States at this time. So the idea of capitalism here is that everybody can be wealthy, and everybody essentially was borrowing so much money that everybody did feel very wealthy. But rather than spending money on things like building factories and things that will give people jobs, really, the people here were spending their money on things like cars and consumer goods. So essentially, just things that benefit the person that has purchased it. Okay. So we're seeing a very unstable version of capitalism, and it's going rampant, and it's going far over here. So it's two different capitalism happening, but we are shifting back over towards the right. And this is kind of where we start off into that decline. So if the 1920s, okay, is the crazy fun party that everybody's had, the 30s is essentially the hangover. Okay. So this is a time when people are facing the consequences of the 20s. And really at this point, it's actually called the Great Depression. Or the dirty 30s, as I like to call it.
Because it's just full of dirty people.
Yeah.
Freaking dirty Americans.
So this right here is a hangover to this. Everybody has to face the consequences of the wild, uncontrolled spending that was happening here. So one of the things that really kick it off is that Europe, you know, those people that couldn't make food for themselves at this point and couldn't manufacture anything, all of a sudden they get back on their feet. Okay. So all the trenches that had been dug into those farmlands, it's recovered. Now it's being successful. They're producing their own food. So the US of A has been producing food as if they're going to support the Europeans. And all of a sudden the Europeans have their own food source. So one of the things that happened is the price of grain just crashes. So that's kind of the first step. And when that happens, people start becoming very pessimistic about their money. And there's a bit of a chain reaction that happens. So like we said, there were banks everywhere during the 1920s. And essentially when one bad thing happens in the economy, everybody starts trying to protect themselves and start pulling money out of their bank. Okay. And at this time, we didn't have giant centralized banking systems. They were like essentially small businesses, these banks. So when people start pulling their money out because they get scared, that bank goes out of business. When that bank goes out of business, people lose jobs. And when one person loses a job, it's a chain reaction. And unemployment just kind of grows and grows and grows. Okay. So this is kind of the key identifying characteristic of the dirty 30s. Okay. So a few different bad things happen, chain reaction, and then people lose a lot of money. And it gets to a point where the United States sees a level of poverty that they have never seen before. Okay. Now, this event is when people begin to actually start thinking about the left again. So when times are good, people want less government. Okay. When times are good, you're like, leave me alone. I can handle myself.
Piss off.
Yeah. Get out of here. I'm doing well. We got jazz. We got movies. We don't have liquor, but we actually do.
But we have lots of liquor, yeah.
But all of a sudden, everything comes just to a horrible, horrible crash. And all of a sudden, people are looking to the government. Okay. And we see that a lot in history. We're actually seeing it right now. Okay. We're actually seeing a lot of, with the crisis happening with COVID-19, a lot of people are looking to the government. Okay. And government is, they're announcing things like $82 billion in stimulus packages to try and get the Canadian economy to recover after all this. Okay. So it's something that happens with every crisis. Okay. So from this point, we're going to start talking about, John Maynard Keynes. Okay. We're going to start talking about, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Okay. We're going to start talking about how things actually start going back this way. People start needing the government. Okay. So what does the government do to fix the issues that were created by uncontrolled spending and possibly just overconfidence?